Hulks were cheap, broken down warships that were used as overflow prisons between about the end of the 18th century and the early 19th century. The hulks were pretty harsh. They were feared by the criminals themselves. They were the most feared part of the sentence of transportation. It wasn't so much even being sent on the horrible journey or being forced to work in a forced labour camp in Australia. It was the years on the hulks that people were particularly frightened of. One of the most appalling factors of the early hulks was the fact that all kinds of criminals would be locked down together at night and just left to get on with it. And then you could end up locked down at night with some incredibly violent and dangerous men. Always, however the prisoners were arranged, always they were very crowded. And when you get that number of people crowded in those kind of insanitary conditions, and as soon as a disease breaks out, it spreads very, very quickly indeed. And we know that there were serious cases of typhus when large numbers of people died, despite efforts at quarantine and even vaccination. Dickens lived in Chatham when he was a boy. His father was appointed as a pay clerk at the dockyard in Chatham. And he remembered his years in the Medway towns very, very vividly and wrote about them later in his journalism. There would certainly have been a number of hulks on the Medway at that time. In fact, he would have lived in Chatham during the peak years of the convict hulks. There would have been a maximum of 9 lying off Chatham on the Medway. And they would have been a part of daily life. People would have been very familiar with them. They're very close. The Medway's not very wide. You would have been able to see people moving around on deck, no problem. So he would have been used to seeing them there, and they returned to him many years later when he was a rich, famous man, when he came back to the area and lived just outside Rochester.